know this is something that you guys have done before, but this whole second section of 1.3 after the polynomial multiplying is the opposite, which is factoring. So what you've got to remember is that factoring is basically the opposite of polynomial multiplication. So what you guys kind of worked on last section was, can you multiply something like this? And you did that 6x cubed plus 9x squared y. So that's what we did. Factoring is bringing it back to where it was. So there's a couple different types of factoring. This is the first type. It's called factor out of GCF, which is a greatest common factor. And just as a note, remember the GCF of things with exponents is a more technical term for that. Is the exponent that's lowest. And I'm going to try to go over factoring pretty quickly because you've done this in Algebra 1 and you did it in Algebra 2. But if I asked you to factor out 14x cubed y to the fourth plus 18x squared y to the fifth. You're looking for basically the GCF of the numbers first. What's the biggest number that goes into 14 and 18? That's 2. And then what's lower, x cubed or x squared? X squared. What's lower, y to the fourth or y to the fifth, y to the fourth. So that's what they have in common. And then what goes on the inside is basically what they don't have in common. So the way I think of it is 2 times what equals 14? And that's 7. X squared times x. X squared times what is x cubed? And I think of it, there's 2 here, 2 x's here, there's 3 x's here, so there's an x missing. And there's 4 x's here, 4 y's here. It already has 4 y's, so you don't have to worry about it. This one has 5, so we're miss. Oh my gosh, brain dead. It already has a y to the fourth, so you don't do anything. Then you go on to the next one. 2 times what is 18? That's 9. X squared and x squared are the same. Don't do anything. Y to the fourth, y to the fifth is 4. There, 5 here, so we need 1 more. And you factored out a GCF. That's the easy part. The next part is a little more difficult. I'm just going to show you one way because, we had a meeting with math teachers this year, and they talked about it. There is a shortcut that I can explain in class if you ask me about it. But basically, the next step is if I'm giving you something like x squared plus 14x plus 48. And what you're going to end up doing is something called factoring by grouping, which you'll see in a minute. So there's no number here, so we can put a 1. And your first step is always to multiply the first and the last. 1 times 48 is 48. So we're going to multiply first and last. Then you're going to find the factors of that number that add up to the middle term. Remember, so if you're having trouble, I was just something like 1 times 48 those together, you get 49. 2 times 24, add those together, 26. 3 times 16, add those together, you get 19. 4 times 12, that's 16, getting closer. 5 doesn't go into it. 6 times 8 equals 14. So those are what you want. Then you're going to break up that middle term with those factors. So basically what I mean is you're going to put 1x squared, but instead of 14x, you're going to write plus 6x plus 8x plus 48. And we're doing that, you're allowed to do that because we haven't actually changed anything. That's still 14x's in the middle. We just broke it up into two separate terms. Now you're going to split and then factor by grouping, which is literally factoring out a GCF on both sides. So what's the biggest number that goes into 1 and 6? It's 1. So I'm not going to write that down. X squared and x, the lowest one is x. What do we multiply x by to turn into x squared? It's just an x. What do we multiply x by to turn into a plus 6? And that's a plus 6. Now I'm going to do the next side. GCF of 8x and 48. That's a positive 8. And whatever this number is goes here. So if that was a minus, you'd have to put a negative there. Plus 8. 8 times what is 8x? X. 8 times what is 48? 6. These two should always match. If they don't match, then it's either not factorable or you did it incorrectly. Now you can rewrite your answer. With the GCF. So they both have x plus 6. So that is your GCF. If you take out an x plus 6, what's left over? There's an x plus 8. And that's your answer. And that's factored. Like I said, you've done this a lot. Hopefully it's something that you remember. But I'm going to do some more example problems because there are some tricky things that can happen with this. First of all, you can have numbers that aren't a 1 in front. 2x squared plus, and then you can have negative numbers as well. So let me think of a good problem with negative numbers in it. You have 2x squared minus 6x minus 8. It's the same steps though. You just got to be aware of negatives. By those you get negative 16. So the thing that I always try to remind kids is if this number is negative in the middle, then when you multiply them and get your factors, the bigger number is negative. So 1 minus 16 is negative 15. That doesn't work. 2 minus 8 equals negative 6. So 2 and negative 8 are the two numbers you need. So you have 2x squared plus 2x minus 8x minus 8. And then you'll split it in half. 2 and 2 are the same. X squared and x. It's an x. What do you multiply squared, 2 and 2 are the same, that's a 1x, there's 2 here, so we need another x. 2x and plus 2x are literally the same thing. So you just put up plus 1. Negative 16. And then, like I said, if this is a negative, you've got to put a negative there. So you have a negative 8. Negative 8, negative 8x is an x. What do you multiply negative 8 by to turn it into a negative 8? Just a positive 1. And so then your answer is x plus 1. 2x minus 8. And there's a reason I picked this question, because there's actually one other thing you could have done to maybe have made your life just a little bit simpler. And that's kind of the last thing that we're going to talk about. It's kind of like an alternate first step that you're going to have to do something sometimes. Factor out the GCF first. So on this one, it didn't matter what we did. But if we look at this, what do 2, 6, and 8 have in common as a factor? And that's a 2. So you could have taken a 2 out first, which would have left you x squared minus 3x minus 4. Then you could have done this inside factoring with smaller numbers. So on this one it didn't matter very much, but there are other times when, with very large numbers it would become much more important to do this. So then there's an invisible 1, negative 4. What multiplies by negative 4 but adds up to be negative 3 is 1 and a negative 4. This 2, you cannot forget that it's there, but you can kind of ignore it until the end. Then you get x squared plus 1. And let me just show you actually something else. It doesn't matter the order of these two numbers. So you could have put minus 4x plus 1x minus 4. Split it in half. X squared negative 4x just has an x in common. And you get x minus 4. 1 and negative 4 just have a 1 in common, so that's a positive. You got to put a positive there. X minus 4. And then you get, as your answer at the very end, x minus 4. X plus 1. And this 2 goes there. And so I don't know if you see here, 2x minus 8. 2 times x is 2x. 2 times negative 4 is minus 8. So actually this whole term ended up being the same as that. And that's the quick review on factoring. Hopefully, once you get some practice in you, you're going to remember doing this and you'll be like, oh yeah, that wasn't too bad. There'll be some more complicated ones, especially ones with GCF first. Oh, actually, I'm not done. I forgot. There's one more thing. That'll make your life a little bit easier. I'm not going to make you memorize all of the special formulas, but there's the one special formula that, and I wrote this before, that you really do need to remember. And that's kind of the opposite of what we did last time with special formulas. And the question is, if you have a squared minus b squared, it turns into a plus b, a minus b. So if there's only two terms and they're both perfect squares, like x squared minus 16, that's a perfect square because it says x squared. We know 16 is a perfect square because that's 4 times 4. It's just automatically x plus 4, x minus 4. This can happen with larger numbers. X squared minus 25. That has to be minus always. Square root of 49 is 7. That's an x squared, so that can be an x. Square root of 25 is 5, so 7x plus 5. 7x minus 5. Now, things can get a little bit more complicated too, in that it won't always be a square there, but you could still use this formula. So just be careful. I could have 100 sixth minus 36y to the fourth. This formula will still work as long as those are even numbers. So the square root of 100 is 10. And then if you take half of 6, you get x to the third. So remember, when you square things, you're multiplying it by itself twice, and then you're adding those exponents. So 3 plus 3 is 6, plus 6y, and half of 4 is 2. And then just the same thing, the negative sign. So be careful of that. And since I went on a little bit more anyway, you should also remember that, well, never mind. I said, we'll see if you watch all these notes, if you ask me for the shortcut for what's called a factoring without a leading